The sleek black Bentley rolled slowly into the parking lot of Westbrook High School, its engine purring like a satisfied lion, and every single person standing near the entrance fell completely silent, their champagne glasses frozen midair, their laughter dying in their throats. Because nobody, absolutely nobody, expected to see Maya Sullivan step out of that car. The same Maya Sullivan they had tormented for 4 brutal years. The same girl they had nicknamed Moth-Eaten Maya because of her second-hand clothes. The same young woman who had promised herself 15 years ago that she would never set foot in this building again. Yet here she was, stepping onto the pavement in designer heels. Her head held high, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination that she hadn't felt since the day she left this town with nothing but a cardboard suitcase and $17 to her name. Victoria Blackwood, who had organized this 15-year reunion, specifically because she wanted to showcase her own success as a real estate agent, felt her jaw literally drop as she watched her former victim walk gracefully toward the gymnasium doors. And the cruel comment she had been preparing, the joke about how Maya probably couldn't afford the $50 reunion ticket, withered and died on her perfectly glossed lips. But this story isn't really about revenge, and it isn't about proving anyone wrong, and it certainly isn't about the Bentley. This story is about what happens when a broken heart learns to forgive, and what happens when the people who break us are forced to confront the consequences of their cruelty, and most importantly, what happens when we choose kindness, even when we have every right to choose bitterness instead. To understand what brought Maya to this moment, we need to travel back 15 years to a small, cramped apartment on the wrong side of Westbrook, where a 17-year-old girl sat on a mattress on the floor, carefully stitching a button back onto her only winter coat, while her mother worked the night shift at the hospital across town. Maya's father had left when she was 3 years old, and her mother, Grace Sullivan, had spent every day since then working double shifts as a nurse's aide, earning barely enough to keep the lights on and food on the table, but never quite enough to buy her daughter the nice clothes and fancy gadgets that all the other kids at Westbrook High seemed to have. Maya never complained, not once, because she understood sacrifice in a way that most teenagers couldn't even imagine, and she saw how her mother's hands were cracked from washing and cleaning, and she noticed how her mother always said she wasn't hungry so that Maya could have a larger portion at dinner. "Education is the door, baby girl," Grace would say every morning as Maya left for school, "and you've got the key right here," and she would tap Maya's temple gently, reminding her that her brilliant mind was her ticket out of poverty. And Maya was brilliant. She consistently ranked at the top of her class. She had already been accepted to 3 different universities with full scholarships, and her teachers often said she had the most curious and creative mind they had ever encountered. But none of that mattered to Victoria Blackwood and her group of followers, who saw only Maya's patched jeans and her discount store backpack and her homemade lunches, and who made it their personal mission to remind Maya every single day that she didn't belong. The harassment started small, as it often does, a whispered comment about Maya's shoes, a giggle when she walked past, an accidental bump in the hallway that sent her books flying across the floor. But it escalated quickly as Victoria realized that Maya would never fight back, that she would just pick up her books quietly and walk away with tears in her eyes that she refused to let fall. By junior year, the bullying had become systematic and relentless. Maya would find cruel notes stuffed into her locker, calling her names that still echoed in her nightmares. She would arrive at the cafeteria to find that someone had spread a rumor that she had lice. So every table would suddenly become full when she approached. She would work for weeks on a group project, only to have her partners remove her name from the final submission, laughing as the teacher commended their work. The worst day came in the spring of senior year, during the annual talent show, when Maya had finally gathered enough courage to sign up and share her poetry, heartbreaking poems about hope and resilience that she had written in the quiet hours of the night. And she had stood on that stage with trembling hands and a shaking voice, and she had been about to speak her first line when Victoria led the entire front row in a mocking chant of motivational Maya. Go back to your hole, and the laughter had spread like wildfire through the auditorium, and Maya had stood there paralyzed, humiliated, beyond words, until a teacher finally intervened and led her off the stage. But the damage was already done, carved into her soul like a scar that would take years to heal. The night before graduation, Maya sat on the fire escape outside her apartment, looking up at the stars through tear-blurred eyes, and she made herself two promises. First, that she would leave Westbrook and never return, and second, that she would build a life so extraordinary that no one would ever have the power to make her feel small again. Her mother found her there at midnight, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and said something that Maya would carry with her forever. Honey, the people who hurt you are fighting their own battles that you can't see hurt people, and one day, you'll be strong enough to see them with compassion instead of pain. And that's when you'll truly be free. Maya didn't believe her mother's words that night, couldn't even imagine a day when she would feel anything but hatred for Victoria and the others. But Grace Sullivan was a wise woman who understood that some lessons take a lifetime to learn. After graduation, Maya disappeared from Westbrook completely, and the years that followed were not easy. In fact, they were harder than anything she had faced in high school. She attended university on her scholarship, working 3 jobs to cover her living expenses while maintaining her perfect grades, and she slept an average of 4 hours a night for 4 straight years. But she graduated at the top of her class with a degree in computer science and a minor in business. The technology industry was booming, and Maya had revolutionary ideas about making complex technology accessible to small businesses and independent creators. But every investor she approached turned her down, sometimes politely and sometimes with barely concealed condescension. And she spent 2 years collecting rejection after rejection while living in a studio apartment so small that her bed was also her couch, her dining table, and her desk. She was 24 years old and ready to give up when she met Harold Freeman, a 72-year-old retired engineer who ran a tiny repair shop in a strip mall on the outskirts of the city, and who became the father figure she had never had. Harold saw something in Maya that she had forgotten was there, that spark of determination, that unbreakable spirit that had survived years of torment, and he became her mentor, her advocate, and eventually her first investor, putting his entire retirement savings into her startup because he believed in her when no one else would. The company grew slowly at first, then faster, then exponentially, as Maya's software solutions revolutionized the way small businesses operated, and by the time she was 30, she had been featured on the covers of 3 major business magazines and had more money than she ever could have imagined. But wealth was never the point. The point was proving to herself that she was worthy, that she was capable, that the voices that had told her she was nothing were wrong. Maya became known not just for her business acumen, but for her philanthropy. She created scholarship programs for underprivileged students, she funded mental health initiatives in schools, and she gave generously to organizations that fought against bullying, because she never forgot where she came from, and she never wanted another child to feel the isolation and despair that she had felt. Her mother, Grace, who had worked her fingers to the bone for so many years, was finally able to retire, and Maya bought her a small cottage near the ocean where she could watch the sunrise every morning and never have to worry about money again. That purchase, more than the Bentley or the penthouse apartment or any of the other trappings of success, was what made Maya feel like she had truly made it. But something was missing, and Maya couldn't quite identify what it was until she received the invitation to her 15-year high school reunion, a tasteful cream envelope that arrived at her office and sat on her desk for 3 weeks. Before she could bring herself to open it, when she finally did, her hands trembled, and she felt 17 again, small and scared and desperate to disappear, and she threw the invitation in the trash immediately, but it haunted her. It haunted her through business meetings and charity galas and quiet evenings at home, and she found herself unable to sleep, unable to focus, because she realized that no matter how successful she became, no matter how many awards she won or how much money she earned, a part of her was still that girl on the stage, paralyzed by cruelty, unable to speak. She talked to her therapist, Dr. Chen, who had been helping her work through her trauma for years, and together they came to a realization that changed everything. Maya wasn't afraid of the reunion because she feared being humiliated again. She was afraid because going back would force her to confront the hatred she still carried in her heart, the bitter resentment that had been motivating her for 15 years, the poison that was preventing her from truly moving forward with her life. Forgiveness isn't about them, Dr. Chen said during their session, leaning forward in her chair with gentle intensity in her eyes. It's about you releasing the hold that the past has on your present and future. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you deserve peace. Those words echoed in Maya's mind for weeks, and slowly, painfully, she began to see the truth in them. She had built an empire, yes, but she had built it on a foundation of anger and a desperate need to prove herself. And as long as she was still trying to prove something to people who hadn't thought about her in years, she wasn't really free. The night before she left for Westbrook, Maya sat in her beautiful penthouse apartment overlooking the city lights, and she cried not tears of sadness, but tears of release, tears of letting go. Tears of finally understanding what her mother had meant all those years ago on that fire escape. She wasn't going to the reunion to show off her Bentley or her designer clothes or her success. She was going to the reunion to say goodbye to the girl who had been hurt there, to honor her pain, and to finally set her free. The drive to Westbrook took 4 hours, and Maya spent most of it listening to her mother's voice on speakerphone, Grace offering encouragement and love, and gentle reminders that no matter what happened, she was proud of the woman her daughter had become. "Remember, baby girl," Grace said, as Maya pulled into the town limits. "Strength isn't about having all the power. It's about having all the power and choosing to use it wisely, with kindness, even when kindness is hard." Maya parked her Bentley, a gift she had given herself on her 32nd birthday, not as a status symbol, but as a reminder of how far she had come. She took a deep breath before stepping out, and that was when she saw them, Victoria and her former followers, now 33 years old but still clustered together like a flock of birds, their faces twisted in expressions of shock and disbelief in something else, something that Maya was surprised to recognize as fear. The gymnasium had been decorated with streamers and balloons, and a banner that read, "Welcome back, Class of 2010. And as Maya walked through those doors, she felt the eyes of her former classmates on her like physical weight, and she heard the whispers beginning. "Is that really Maya Sullivan? Didn't she start that tech company? I heard she's worth millions." And she understood, for the first time, that success is a peculiar kind of revenge. Not because it hurts the people who hurt you, but because it forces them to confront their own choices and their own failures. Victoria approached her first, because of course she did. Victoria had always needed to be in control, always needed to be the center of attention, and her smile was brittle and false as she extended her hand and said, in a voice that dripped with forced friendliness, "Maya, what a surprise. We're all so thrilled you could make it. You simply must tell us all about what you've been doing with yourself." But Maya looked at Victoria closely, really looked at her for the first time, and she saw things that she had missed when they were teenagers, the dark circles under Victoria's eyes that no amount of expensive concealer could hide, the tension in her jaw that spoke of sleepless nights and constant worry, the way her designer dress didn't quite fit right, as if she had bought it in better times and couldn't afford to replace it. And Maya realized, with a sudden clarity that took her breath away, that Victoria was suffering, that the real estate market had crashed, that Victoria's husband had left her, as she was barely keeping up appearances while drowning in debt and regret instead of feeling satisfaction. Maya felt something she never expected: compassion. "Victoria," Maya said quietly, and her voice was gentle in a way that made Victoria's eyes widen with surprise and suspicion. "It's good to see you truly, and I hope you're doing well." Victoria blinked, clearly thrown off balance, clearly waiting for the cutting remark, the triumphant smirk, the revenge that she herself would have delivered without hesitation, but it never came. The evening progressed, and Maya moved through the crowd with grace and warmth, reconnecting with the few classmates who had been kind to her, listening to stories of marriages and children and careers, offering genuine congratulations for their accomplishments and genuine sympathy for their struggles. Several people approached her to apologize, not Victoria, not the main perpetrators, but others on the periphery who had laughed along or looked away when they should have spoken up. And Maya accepted each apology with the same simple phrase: "Thank you for saying that. I forgive you, and I hope you've been able to forgive yourself, too." It wasn't easy, and there were moments when she had to step outside and breathe deeply and remind herself of Dr. Chen's words. But each time she offered forgiveness, she felt the weight on her shoulders lighten just a little bit more. The turning point of the evening came unexpectedly, as such moments often do. Maya had stepped out to the parking lot to get some air when she heard someone crying softly near the edge of the building, and she followed the sound to find Jennifer, one of Victoria's former followers, sitting on the curb with her head in her hands, her mascara streaming down her cheeks. Jennifer had been particularly cruel back in high school. She was the one who had started the lice rumor, the one who had organized the talent show Humiliation, and Maya's first instinct was to walk away, to leave her there in her misery, because wasn't this what she deserved? But then she remembered her mother's words, and her therapist's words, and the realization that had brought her here in the first place, and she found herself walking toward Jennifer instead of away. "Hey," Maya said softly, sitting down on the curb beside her, and Jennifer looked up with terror in her eyes, clearly expecting attack, clearly bracing for the revenge that seemed inevitable. "Are you okay?" Jennifer laughed bitterly through her tears. "Are you seriously asking me that? After everything I did to you? Maya, I was a monster, made your life a living hell, and now look at you. You're this incredible success story, and I'm sitting here in the parking lot of our high school because I can't even afford the drinks inside, and my marriage is falling apart, and my kids barely speak to me, and I don't know how it all went so wrong." The words came flooding out, years of guilt and self-loathing pouring from her like water from a broken dam. And Maya listened, without interrupting, without judging, because she understood that healing sometimes requires witness, and witness is one of the greatest gifts we can give each other. When Jennifer finally fell silent, Maya was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "What you did to me was wrong," she said finally, and Jennifer flinched, but Maya continued, "And it took me years to recover, years of therapy, years of doubting myself, years of wondering if maybe you were all right about me, but I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you this because you need to understand the impact of cruelty, not so that you can carry more guilt, but so that you can use that understanding to be different going forward. Jennifer, I forgive you." The words hung in the air between them, and Jennifer began crying again, but differently this time, not with despair, but with relief, with the first tentative hope she had felt in years. They talked for an hour out there in the parking lot, and Maya learned that Jennifer's life had been harder than anyone knew, that her father had been demanding and cruel, that she had bullied others because she was being bullied at home, that she had spent every day since high school carrying the weight of her shame, and Maya found that her compassion only grew as she listened. Before the evening ended, Maya made Jennifer an offer, a job at her company, nothing fancy, an entry-level position in customer service, but with room to grow, and a fair wage and benefits that would help her get back on her feet. It wasn't charity. It was a hand up, the same kind of hand that Harold Freeman had extended to her all those years ago. And as Jennifer hugged her with gratitude streaming down her face, Maya finally understood what her mother had meant about seeing others with compassion instead of pain. This was freedom. This was healing. This was the life she had been trying to build all along. The reunion wound down around 11 o'clock, and Maya found herself standing alone in the middle of the gymnasium, looking at the walls that had witnessed her greatest humiliations and her loneliest moments. And she felt something shift inside her, something settle into place. She walked to the stage where she had been silenced 15 years ago, and she stood there in the dim light, and she recited one of her old poems, not for an audience, just for herself, just for the girl she used to be in. Her voice didn't shake, and her hands didn't tremble, and when she finished, she felt the last chains of the past finally fall away. Victoria never apologized, not that night and not in the years that followed. But Maya came to accept that some people aren't ready for accountability, and that her forgiveness didn't depend on their response. She could forgive even those who never asked for it, because forgiveness was never really about them anyway. As she drove her Bentley out of the Westbrook High parking lot for the last time, Maya called her mother to tell her how the evening had gone. And Grace Sullivan wept with joy at the woman her daughter had become, not the CEO, not the millionaire, not the success story, but the woman who had chosen kindness when she had every reason to choose cruelty, the woman who had broken the cycle, the woman who had finally set herself free. 3 years later, Jennifer had risen to a management position at Maya's company and had rebuilt her relationship with her children, and she would often tell new employees about the night that changed her life. The night that a woman she had once tormented chose to offer her grace instead of revenge. Maya established a foundation in Harold Freeman's name after he passed away peacefully at 80, and that foundation helped thousands of young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds turn their dreams into reality. And on the 20-year reunion invitation, which arrived in a familiar cream envelope, Maya wrote 2 words before sealing it in the attending envelope, with joy. Because she had learned, after all those years, that the best revenge isn't success, the best revenge is happiness, and the best success is peace, and the best peace comes from letting go of the very need for revenge at all. The bullies who had waited to roast the loser had expected to see a broken woman crawl back in shame. Instead, they witnessed something far more powerful than a Bentley or a designer dress. They witnessed the quiet, unshakable strength of a woman who had turned her pain into purpose, her wounds into wisdom, and her hatred into the only thing that could ever truly set her free: love.